He views everything political. He never understood. You don't factor in partisan politics when it comes to federal prosecutions.
He came to New Mexico, Rove.
He came in the fall at least twice. One to do a fundraiser for Heather Wilson.
That was the Republican candidate for Senate.
Right. She was the incumbent for the House.
Congress.
She was the incumbent Congresswoman. At the time she called me, she was either at dead even heat, or she was a little bit behind her Democrat challenger. But you know what? I didn't care about that, Greg, because my job was to do law enforcement, not engage in partisan politics.
So wait, so Rove came to New Mexico. Was there a connection between Rove's visit to New Mexico and your firing?
Oh, I'm sure he heard an earful by prominent Republicans that I wasn't doing the job they wanted me to do, which was, they didn't care about the immigration cases or the narcotics cases. They cared about two classes of cases: public corruption cases and voter fraud cases.
And voter fraud cases, you said there was no voter fraud.
Right, and I know, and some people make the distinction: election fraud and voter fraud. Election fraud meaning the system, voter fraud meaning the individual. Well, we looked into it, and again, the evidence wasn't there.
So was George Bush involved in canning you?
Yes, the involvement that I'm aware of, that the evidence shows right now, is that Domenici complained directly to President Bush, and that Bush then called Alberto Gonzales, the Attorney General, and complained about my alleged lack of vigorous enforcement of voter fraud laws.
And was Karl Rove involved in that? Did he speak to the president?
I believe he did, yes.
And now, of course, the president has claimed executive privilege to stop Karl Rove's assistant from testifying.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, the executive privilege has only been recognized since 1974, and if you look at the Nixon case, the President Nixon case, the Supreme Court ruled that it's not absolute. So I believe if push comes to shove, which I believe this will end up in court, that the administration is going to lose that claim.
Do they have something to hide?
I believe they do. I mean, there are only two reasons to claim executive privilege. One is out of principle. We don't have to turn this over to a co-equal branch of government. Or the second ground is they have something to hide, and I believe they have something to hide.
What could they be hiding?
Incriminating emails, incriminating memoranda, incriminating testimony by Harry Myers, Karl Rove, and Sarah Taylor.
So what would they be trying to, if they're trying to keep Karl Rove's assistant off the stand, what would they be hiding away?
Well, I think New Mexico was just one of numerous jurisdictions in which there was a battleground state, there were close vote tallies, and they wanted to ensure that this alleged voter fraud was going to be put to rest, but also to send a message to scare away voters of the Democrat persuasion.
What about Tim Griffin?
Well, Tim Griffin finally did the right thing and stepped down. He should have never been U.S. attorney. He's fundamentally unqualified.
What about his sending out these so-called caging lists?
It's reprehensible conduct, and it may be illegal.
Do you think it's odd that he gave out these lists and then was appointed U.S. attorney?
Not at all. There was a quid pro quo there. It was a pure or an impure political motivation, and Bud Cummings should still be the U.S. attorney there, but Bud would not have done that.
Take a look at this. This is Tim Griffin. This is the guy who was in charge of the caging operation. He's the research director and deputy communications director for the Republican National Committee. He was the assistant to Karl Rove. Caging is a crime. So did Tim do the time? Not exactly. Cummins, the honest prosecutor from Arkansas, was fired because he would not bust innocent voters. He was replaced by Tim Griffin. The perpetrator became the prosecutor. After my broadcast about the caging and glaciers for BBC television, I got a call from the office of Congressman John Conyers. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. I was to meet Conyers at midnight in the hotel room in New York and show him the evidence that I had of Karl Rove, his assistant Tim Griffin, and the caging operation. By the next morning, Tim Griffin had resigned.
Obviously, I've seen the internet stuff about caging. I'll first just say the allegations that are on the internet and now have spread to tabloids and what have you are completely and absolutely false, number one, and ridiculous. Caging, as you may know, I had to look it up, is a direct mail term for basically organizing returned mail. Now, I know that it has been defined newly on the internet as some sort of purging voters, suppressing voters, caging voters, vote caging, all these different things go back to one guy, his name I won't mention, who wrote something about me, and when I came and rolled the U.S. Attorney thing, he hit the jackpot because he had, somebody in one of his stories was now in the media. It's completely untrue, and I mean, it's not even, there's not even a scintilla of truth to his theory. And I'll just say that it's so untrue. I don't know exactly what you want me to say. I didn't do any of the stuff that he alleges. So, and of course, if I didn't do it, I don't know of any Coral Rove impact. Now, I've seen where he says all this. This is all made up of whole talk. I didn't cage votes. I didn't cage mail. I didn't cage animals. I'm not.
Caging voters, firing prosecutors, obstructing them in their work, is it just bad manners, or is it a crime? I thought I'd ask an expert, a dean at the law school at Pace University, whose father many years ago was Attorney General of the United States, and his uncle was president.
Is that you?
Yeah,
You're the president?
yeah.
That's amazing. When was that?
61, 62, yeah, 61, 60 or 61. Downstairs.
So explain this character.
This is a gerfalcon. There's a bunch of falconers who work at this office, and including me. The master falconer takes 7 years, and you have to take an exam. And I wrote the exam. And the federal government administers, yeah. Caging is a system by which you can target cohorts of voters and get them excluded from the lists. And it's illegal in this country. And it's illegal particularly it's illegal under a number of statutes, but if you target black or minority voters, it's illegal under the Voting Rights Act of 1965 specifically. And also there's a 1986 court order because the Republican Party tried to use this system against black people in our country in 1986. They were caught, they were prosecuted, and rather than go to jail, they settled the case by promising that they would never engage in these tactics again. It's a felony, and it's punished by high fines, but also imprisonment. The way that the Republican Party has done this in the past is that they will get the addresses, for example, of all of the black voters in a particular state. Then they will mail certified letters to each of those homes. And if the voter is not there at the time that the letter is delivered to accept delivery, the post office will automatically send that letter back to the sender, which in this case is the Republican National Committee, which spent millions of dollars getting these lists and then sending out letters to virtually all the black people in America. If the letter comes back, the Republican National Committee uses that letter as presumptive evidence that the voter gave a false address on his voting form and is therefore ineligible to vote. The Republican National Committee will then go to the Secretary of State. In certain states, those secretaries of state, particularly the key states like Ohio and Florida, were Republicans, but not just Republicans. They also served as chairs of the Bush-Cheney re-election campaign. So they were closely aligned with the Republican National Committee's efforts. They will hand those caging lists of the so-called ineligible voters to the secretaries of state, and the Secretary of State will then remove those voters from the list. The voter will never be informed that he's been removed from the list. Now, in many cases, these voters were not at the home because they were in school. They were stationed in Afghanistan or Iraq, or as you can see from this, virtually every one of these voters was stationed at a naval air station. So they were serving the military, serving our country in the United States military, and that's the reason they weren't home. It's illegal